512 grueling miles and 31,000 feet of climbing was the challenge for racers of the HooDoo 500 event recently, taking riders through the beautiful state of Utah, including Red Canyon, Bryce Canyon, the Grand Staircase, Escalante, Cedar Breaks, and more. On today's episode, we'll be hearing from the overall winner of this year's race, American racer Dave Haase, who rode HooDoo self-supported in the Voyager category, setting 2 course records and clinching the #1 spot on the podium overall, outcompeting both the self-supported and supported racers. I'm your host, Justin Tu. Let's roll. Hey Ultra family, Justin Tu here, your host of the Ultra Cycling Show. Thanks for tuning in for today's episode where we'll be covering the HooDoo 500 with the Voyager category champion, Dave Haase. Dave, thanks for joining the program today.
Yeah, Justin, thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure to be able to speak with you just 1 week after the race, right?
Yeah, I do. It's just exactly, yeah. I was suffering right now, probably sitting at a gas station refueling to get to the finish line. So,
wow. Okay, we're going to dive into all of that after a quick sprint round of questions, just a series of questions where we can get to know you in a nutshell. You can answer in a few sentences. Just a fun way to get started. The first question, Dave, how long have you even been riding bicycles?
It's been about 30 years where I've been riding pretty seriously.
Right. And of course, you've done the Race Across America on how many occasions?
I've done it 7 times,
wow.
5 finishes and 2 DNFs.
Right. Amongst the host of other ultra races, and so you're very experienced. How long have you actually been an ultra cyclist?
I would say it's now probably getting close to about what I would consider maybe 17, 18 years.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so not a long time, but it's not been all of my riding career. I used to do a lot of crit racing and mountain biking and had a lot of fun doing that, and I just started riding further and further. So
okay, so definitely a strong rider, not just one that likes to ride long distances. How many bicycles do you own, Dave?
Own 6.
6, okay. And I see your background there. It looks like a bike shop. I mean, there's so much gear there. Tell me about that.
Yeah, I'm the owner of Attitude Sports. Been in the bike business for now 25. This is our 25th year.
Nice.
And I've worked in the bike shop. It's been my passion since I got started. It's kind of how I started the shop. So I get to do every day what I love to do.
That's really awesome. And where are you guys located?
We're located in Fond du Lac, Wisconsin.
And that's where you live. But you do a lot of racing all over the U.S., so I'm sure you're traveling quite a bit then.
Yeah, whenever I can. There's not a lot of ultra races locally, so I do end up traveling to the bigger main races that I view as like important stepping stones for different events. So yes.
Cool. All right, so you have about 5 or 6 bikes that you commonly use. What's your favorite of those bicycles?
Well, we're a specialized dealer, so I have a Roubaix and a Tarmac and
nice.
Diverge. I think I like to spend the most time on my gravel bike, the Diverge. Although in Wisconsin we hardly have any gravel, so then same deal. I got to travel to kind of find gravel. So I spend most of my time riding the Roubaix. So then I can kind of venture wherever I want to go when I'm out on the road.
And is your Roubaix the most comfortable bike that you have?
It is also, yeah, probably the most comfortable. Widest tires, a little bit wider tires on it, and has the Future Shock that makes it smooth. And so, yeah, it is, I would say, my most comfortable bike.
Cool. Yeah, I actually own a Roubaix myself, and I must say, very comfortable, especially for a long ride on bad tarmac.
Yeah, for sure, definitely.
Okay, Dave, what bicycle computer is your preference? A Garmin?
I use the Garmin.
Garmin? Okay.
The 1030.
Oh, okay. A very popular one. What's your favorite ride snack, Dave?
Favorite ride snack? Well, a peanut butter bar. I stop at a local coffee shop that makes homemade peanut butter bars, and I get one of those every day I'm out for a ride. So.
Oh, cool. And you did a ride just this morning, right?
I did. Yep. I did. Yep. So, and I stopped at that coffee shop and had a coffee and peanut butter bar and then came home to
Cool.
get to work later today.
And how long was your ride this morning?
75 miles.
Nice. Okay. Good training ride, or is that on the shorter end for you?
That's pretty average. I don't
Mm,
go out and do lots of super long rides, but I would say
mm,
I'm very consistent, 40 to 75 miles daily.
okay. Very good. And was there any particular structure in today's workout?
There was not. It was a little bit still of a recovery from doing the HooDoo, although I was
Yeah.
pushing the pace on climbs only. So
Mm,
whenever I had a climb, I would push the pace up the climb. But for the most part, today was not structured really at all.
mm. How tall are you, Dave?
I'm 6 foot,
Okay. So one of the taller riders. And how much do you weigh?
162.
Oh, wow. Okay. So would you say you're pretty good on the climbs then?
I'm okay at climbing.
Uh-huh.
Sometimes I think I'm good, and then I get crushed by people. So
Oh,
I
okay.
would say I'm an above average climber, but it's not. I don't know if it's my specialty for sure.
Mm. Okay. After a long, hard ride like HooDoo 500, what's your favorite post-ride meal?
Well, pizza is always my favorite post ride meal.
Oh,
After the HooDoo, I went to get some pizza, but the pizza place was closed, so
oh,
I went and had some Mexican. I had some fish tacos.
oh, delicious. Now, how many
Not
of
so
those
great
could you
when you're
eat?
in Utah. They're better in
Oh,
San Diego, right?
yeah, 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 definitely. And how many tacos can you eat after a long ride like that?
Usually my mind is telling me I'm starving, but once I start eating, it's not very many. I don't
Mm,
feel like I eat very much right after. The next
mm,
day, then I do crave a lot more food. So it's
mm.
always a little hard right after because my mind tells me I'm hungry, but um, I start to eat and it's like I'm not really as hungry as I thought.
Right, right. And of course you're eating plenty and staying hydrated throughout the whole ride. So I could imagine you're not starving just right after.
Yeah, generally speaking, when you
Yeah.
do Voyager, that's one of the challenges is to keep your food and nutrition and hydration proper because it's a little hard to keep track of it all. And
Mm,
you can't always eat what you want or drink what you want because you're relying on some gas stations once in a while for food. And
mm,
so generally speaking, that's good.
right. Now, outside of eating, what's your favorite ride hydration?
Um, I use Tailwinds
Hmm,
as my hydration product. So I like that because it has 200 calories.
hmm,
There's no maltodextrin in it like a lot of other drinks, and my stomach does not like the maltodextrin. So I
hmm.
find that all of the flavors of Tailwinds are really good. I enjoy all of them. And they
Oh, okay.
have some caffeinated ones and non caffeinated.
And is that what you use for all of your ultra races, including the Race Across America?
I have for the last probably 3 or 4 years just used Tailwinds. Yep.
Hmm. In terms of terrain, do you prefer riding on the climbs, the descents, the rollers, or the flats?
I think I like rollers as long as I can roll fast enough to get up over the top of them.
Yeah.
Long climbs wear me out for sure. If it's a continuous long climb, those I don't love. And I do like to go fast. So if I can
Hmm.
keep some momentum and speed and do the rollers, that's pretty good. I like those.
Interesting. Well, you're the first on the show that likes the rollers, Dave.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good.
first
Well,
place
that's
there
what
in
we
that.
have in Wisconsin. We have no big climbs. We have a lot of
Ah,
rollers.
I see. Okay. Do you know what your max speed down a hill is, Dave? Are you pretty comfortable descending?
I'm fairly comfortable. I crashed a couple of years ago at a gravel race and
Hmm.
broke some vertebrae and collarbone and um, a bunch of other parts, scapula. So
Wow.
since then, I haven't been going quite as fast. That
Hmm.
was on a descent, and I was flying on a gravel descent and hit a rock and blew my wheel apart. So since
Oh
then, I've
boy.
been a little more timid.
Yeah.
I would say I'm not bad considering I live in Wisconsin.
Mm.
I think if I lived in the mountains, I would be much better.
Yeah, right. Okay, when do you enjoy riding the most through the year? A particular season, fall, winter, spring, or summer?
I love the fall. That's my favorite time around here in Wisconsin. So we're
Mm,
just getting into my favorite time of year to ride.
cool.
September, October, early November.
Mm,
Our leaves start to change colors in the trees, and it's slightly cooler, and so I like the fall the best.
Yeah, sounds nice. How about a time of day that you prefer riding?
For sure, early morning. I get up early every morning. I'm out when it's dark and ride as the sun comes up. So that's my favorite time for sure.
Okay.
I'm much stronger in the morning than I am at night too.
Mm. What was the temperature this morning on your ride?
It started out about 55 degrees, so it was
Ah,
not too bad. Pretty good.
ah.
I had to wear arm warmers today, so.
Mm. And is that a nice temperature for you?
Yeah, I do like that. I don't love super hot weather, so
Mm.
that's a really nice temperature, yes.
Mm. But of course, you've done Race Across America and many of these other events where you are going through hot places like the deserts. How do you fare in those kinds of conditions?
That's my toughest part of when I do RAM is if I
Mm.
can get through the desert, then I know that things are going to be pretty good and get through decently. So that's always my biggest fear
Mm.
in RAM is getting through the heat of the desert. And then in HooDoo it wasn't as hot as it's been, so that was pretty good.
Mm.
So definitely though, that is when I struggle the most, is when when it's 95 and above. I don't like that temperature very much.
Mm. Right. Okay, Dave, do you think ultra cycling requires more physical or mental training?
I think it's about equal. You certainly have to be fit,
Mm.
but a lot of the racing is mental. So staying on your bike, um, and focusing when it's hot or windy or you've got a headwind after 30 hours, that takes a lot of mental strength. But you
Mm.
still have to physically be capable of riding those distances. So I
Right.
think it's both equally important.
Mm. Definitely. Okay, Dave, you've done a lot of ultra events. What would you say is your favorite?
I think I think the HooDoo race overall, for
Hmm.
some reason, that's my favorite. I've only
Mhm.
done it as a Voyager. I like the difference in the varied terrains in the course and different temperatures and things about it. And there are points where you can have drop bags, but they're far enough apart that you you may struggle with it. So I've had 3 finishes there that have been really good finishes, and I've had 2 DNFs. So I mean, it's kind of like that race is
Oh,
hard and challenging. So I think I
mm,
like that race as one of the best races.
incredible. Now, were all five of those as Voyager?
Yes, yep. I've only done that race as a Voyager.
Mm. So, for those who don't know, describe what the Voyager category entails.
So the Voyager category basically is you are mostly self-supported in that you have to carry all of your own supplies, bike, repair parts, tubes, everything like that. There are time stations where you can have a drop bag.
Mm.
So in HooDoo, there was a few drop bags where you could leave clothing, water, food, nutrition, and so you're mostly self-supporting. So a lot of times you're stopping at gas stations along the way, convenience stores, wherever you can stop to get the extra supplies that you need to get to the finish line. So I like that because partly for me as well, traveling longer distances to do races, it's just less expensive to do some of these cool ultra races that way. And it's also really challenging, both physically and mentally.
Yeah, I can imagine. Adds a different element to what's already a difficult endeavor.
It does, yes, yes.
And so, Dave, I'm looking here at a photo that was posted by the HooDoo 500 organizers. HooDoo 500 Voyager champion Dave Haase from Fond du Lac, Wisconsin, crushed the field and set a new Voyager and Voyager 50 plus record. So 35 hours, 43 minutes, and that's covering 500 miles, right?
Yeah, it is. Yep, 512 to be exact.
512 miles. And how many feet of climbing?
Ooh, geez. I think there's about 32,000 feet of climbing in that race.
Incredible. Let's take a look. I do have it up here. Here's the hoodoo500.com website. So we could get some glimmer here from this photograph of what you were looking at for 35 hours.
Yeah, that's the great thing about that race is it's super beautiful. You're in Zion and Bryce Canyons and the HooDoos and This is the first time I've ever gotten over Boulder Mountain when it was still daylight in all of the times I've done the race, which is a pretty good feat. And I got to see some extra scenery that was phenomenal. So that's one of the things I like about the race is the scenery is beautiful.
Yeah, I could imagine. And so the race, pulling up here to the right with GPS route, it is in Utah, so towards the western side of the United States for those who don't know. And of course, you are in Wisconsin. Let's see, this is some trivia. Here is Wisconsin. I found it.
Yep.
In under 5 seconds. All right.
There you go.
Very cool. So you made it all the way out here. I'd imagine you drove out?
I flew into Vegas.
Okay. Oh, okay. So you packed all of your gear and then had to assemble that again?
Yep, that's correct. Yeah.
Okay, very cool. So it looks like it is not 99.9% in Utah, but I see here it is just skirting through Arizona.
Yeah, we did drop into Arizona for a little bit. You bet. Yep.
Awesome. So just looking here, we could see the elevation chart, and when you start over here in St. George, Utah, looks like you're making quite an ascent through a lot of the course.
Yeah, definitely. That's a whole new perspective.
Yeah. So it looks like it approaches almost 10,000 feet at the highest point, or is the highest point over here actually at the end?
Yep, it is. Yeah, the second mountain is the highest. So there's two mountains that hit about 9,500 feet.
Wow. Okay. So the course is a counterclockwise course then.
It is. Yep. Kind of loops around and then comes back almost together. And
so I see these icons here are showing the different time stations. You were talking about that, and you said that you were able to have some drop bags at each of these locations, but it does look like they are spaced quite far apart. I mean, given that it is a 512-mile course.
Yeah, they are. Time station 1 for me was 89 miles, and I just actually at that time station I had 4 water bottles is it. And then time station 2 is just a gas station on the course. So you're purchasing your own supplies at the gas station. And there are no drop bags there. And then at time station 3 in Escalante, that's where I really got my first drop bag. And that's where I picked up my warm clothes because we were going to go climb over Boulder Mountain. So.
Oh, wow. Okay. Now, what time did you start the race?
Start at 5 a.m.
Okay. So you get a ride through all of the day. How much ground did you cover within that first 24 hours?
First 24 hours, I made it to time station 6. Let's see, what city was that?
Time station 6. Let's see here. Oh,
would have been
over here.
Not Cedar City. It would have been Pankwitch. Pankwitch is I got there.
Oh wow, incredible. Now tell me about the temperature throughout the 35 hours that you're racing. So you started at 5 a.m. What was the temperature like then and the conditions?
It was actually pretty decent. It was about 70 degrees when we started. And there was a bit of overcast, which was a very nice thing. So there were moments when it almost rained or there were a few drops. I think some racers did get rained on. Wow. And it got to a high of about 90, probably 95 the first day. But it was still was not a lot of sun. It was mostly cloud covered. So that was good. And then it got down as I was heading into Pankwitch. It's a descent into Pankwitch. And there I got really cold. It got down to about 39 degrees, 38 degrees.
Wow.
So I was a little cold. I forgot to bring knee warmers. And so I was a little chilled heading into Pankwitch.
I can imagine.
And that was probably the lowest temperature. It dropped down to about 38 there.
Wow. Yeah, that's very, very cold.
Yes. And then the second part of the day, it warmed up really quick. So when I left Cedar City, which is probably, I think, one of the most challenging parts of the course, you're on just a steady incline, usually into a headwind, and that's what we had. And it got very warm at that point. It was probably 10 o'clock in the morning, 11, and it warmed up to, probably 100 degrees that day. So.
Wow. So from 38 to 100, that's quite a range to account for, especially as an unsupported rider where you're self-supported.
Yes. Yeah, you
And
end up carrying a few too many clothes.
right
So
now,
that's pretty standard gear. Yeah,
yeah. So this photo is actually from your race across Oregon, right?
it is. Yep.
Yeah. So just about a month ago, you rode that also as a Voyager. How did you do in that event?
I won that event as well.
Nice.
Um,
So
overall.
just incredible. Yeah, overall. And so even for the HooDoo 500, my understanding is with your 35-hour ride time, you did also get the overall, not just the Voyager category, right?
Yeah, I finished 5 hours ahead of the next person in the race.
Incredible. And was that person supported or also riding Voyager?
Supported.
Supported.
Supported. Yep.
Incredible. And so does that ever cross your mind as you're racing as a Voyager, trying to keep an eye out for those supported riders and trying to
Uh,
compete with them? Does that motivate you?
totally. Every time I enter a race, that's the goal, is for me to be
Mm.
the first finisher. And a lot of times I even want to beat the teams that are out there.
Wow.
There was a really first fast team in this year's event, so that was
Mm.
impossible.
Mm.
But I did get passed by a few little bit slower four-person teams, and that kind of upset me a little bit. My goal is to always
Mm.
win the race
Yeah.
overall when I do a Voyager event. So,
Right.
but that's kind of a big dream too, because the teams are way faster for sure.
Right. Right. Well, incredible effort. So, Dave, looking at this, it looks like a standard setup for your Voyager kinds of races. Tell me about what you have here. It looks like a very nice setup that you've developed over, I'd imagine, over the years.
Yeah, in the HooDoo race, one time I came over Boulder Mountain and it was raining and about 35 degrees, and I had to drop out. I got so cold, I was by myself,
Hmm.
so I didn't have the right gear. So after that, I made a commitment to always make sure I had rain gear,
Hmm.
jackets, and warm enough gear to that I would survive. So I started always carrying a raincoat. And here, the temperature in Race Across Oregon got cooler. But
Hmm.
I try to carry not too much gear, so I always have the raincoat. So I put my raincoat on here, even though it was sunny, but that was more for warmth. But
Hmm.
I carry a pack. This happens to be an Osprey pack that I use and like. It's one of my smaller ones. So the trick is trying to go as light as you can, so you're fast,
Hmm.
but still have enough gear with you that you're not suffering. So in my pack, I carry a spare battery
Hmm.
for my lights. And I like to have a headlight on my helmet that I don't always use, but I like to have that in case I get a flat tire or I need it for repair. Or in one instance in the HooDoo one year, my headlight went out,
Hmm.
and I had to use my helmet light to get to the time station so I could get
Wow.
another battery. And I got there just as that light went out too. So, but so I have some warm jacket, arm warmers. Um, I actually have some arm coolers, batteries, and some food.
So I imagine you said you pack light, but there are some gas stations and other things along the route. So I'd imagine you plan for that.
Yes, I do. I carry my drink mix with me, but not necessarily water,
Hmm.
so that if I can, kind of look at the map and say, okay, our checkpoints are here, and these are where cities where I can get water,
Hmm.
which is getting challenging in some of these events. But because certain things, especially in these COVID times, we have some of the gas stations and stuff are closed. There's not as many open when you're in the remote
Hmm.
areas.
Hmm.
So I get water from those areas and use my drink mix.
Hmm. Interesting. And so it does look like in this pack you are able to carry some amount of water in there.
Yes, I start out the race
Hmm.
with that pack. When I've like in Oregon, I did use the hydration system in the pack
Hmm.
for the first setup. So it's a 50-ounce bladder in there. Once I got once that was empty, I just used water bottles and continued to use water bottles the rest of the time, because I was able to get my water bottles filled. And that was a little more of a precaution to make sure I could get far enough along the course that I could carry, that I would have enough water.
Right.
So I am able to carry water. I just always don't necessarily like to if I don't have to.
Yeah, makes sense. And I see on your setup here, well, what bike is this one here?
That's a tarmac. And I'm running the tarmac with 28 tires. And I have 4 water bottles on that bike. So I have 2 in the main area, and then I have a seat holding basically a mount like a triathlete would use, where I had my 4 water bottles and spare tire and stuff kind of attached to that. The only issue I don't like about that is when you're climbing, it's a lot of weight in the back of the bike. So I'm going to do another Voyager race. I'm trying to figure out how to get my water lower on the bike so it's not as top heavy.
Yeah, sounds like a good optimization. Now, I see on your front you have your aero bars. They're pretty low. They're not raised. Is that pretty common for you, even in the race across America?
It is. Yep. That's the setup I've been using for a long time. Yep.
Wow. Yeah, I'd say quite uncommon in the ultra world because it's much more of an aggressive position. But I'd imagine your back, your arms, everything is all dialed in and used to that.
For the most part, it is. Yeah, that's, in 2019 when I did Ram, though, that's where I struggled because I had crashed and hurt my shoulder. I crashed in two different times in once in 17 and once in 2018. And I think my setup for Ram might have been a little more aggressive, and my arm kind of gave out, my shoulder gave out. So, but I still like that setup. I don't ride an aero bike or a time trial bike, so I like to ride the same bike most of the race, and so I'm pretty comfortable with that setup.
Now, in something like the Race Across America, where you do have a crew, you also bring in spare bikes as well. So if something does happen, you can quickly switch out. Now, when you're riding Voyager, you only have the single bike. So I'd imagine that adds some level of anxiety, perhaps?
It for sure does, and in HooDoo this year, I got a flat within the first 15 miles.
Oh my goodness.
So I got that fixed. The guys that were in the race all passed me, and I, passed them back.
Yeah.
1 year in HooDoo, I got like 8 flats. So my drop pegs always have lots of CO2 and tubes in them, just because, you never know. That is always an issue is, if something happens to your bike. So you got to carry, obviously chain tools, and sometimes I'll even carry just a chain pre-cut to the right size in case I would break a chain. But that's always an issue. And always have enough money on you in the Voyager in case you need to bribe someone to drive you back to the start line.
Yeah, that's a good tip. I hope everyone makes a note of that one. Dave, on any of your self-supported or Voyager races, have you ever had to drop out of the race because of a big technical issue with your bicycle?
I have not. In one HooDoo race, I had gotten 9 flats. I had no flats or no tubes left. And I did end up dropping out of that race, but it was more because I had gotten so cold on a descent at night that I just couldn't warm up. And one of the officials that was driving to that checkpoint actually ended up picking me up. I sat in his car for a while and realized I wasn't going to warm up. I was a little bit of hypothermia. And no, I've never had to drop because of a bike issue. I've wanted to create bike issues once in a while. But I've never done that.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And I guess that is encouraging for myself and even others watching. I mean, you've done so many self-supported events and hundreds of miles. So, all of us can kind of rest more assured that when we're on our short training rides, 50 miles, 100 miles, or even a 200 mile, that we shouldn't stress too much about that. No.
I do carry I carry a tire always because I've had issues. So I do carry a replacement tire, and then I just carry, as many tubes as I think I can. So I always put extra tubes in my drop bags just in case I need them as I approach. And that comes from the one HooDoo where I flatted a lot. I realized, it would be really bad to drop out of a race because you flatted and didn't have any more tubes.
Right. Now, on your bike that you're racing in the Race Across Oregon, it was the tarmac. Was it the same in the HooDoo 500?
It was. Yep. Same exact bike. Pretty much the same setup.
So before a big event like one of these 500-mile races, what are you doing to your bike in terms of maintenance beforehand? And are you swapping out the tires with ones that you only use, for example, for racing purposes?
I'm not. I wear out my tires fairly quickly. When you throw, like for instance, a couple 500-mile races. So before HooDoo,
Mm.
the week before HooDoo, I did a 12-hour race at a local racetrack that we had, and
Wow.
I did 240 miles Saturday,
Oh my
the
goodness.
day, Saturday before the race. So I looked at my tires and they were good. I don't switch them out, usually, unless they're nicked up and checked a lot, then I might. Otherwise, I just kind of go with what I have and
Mm.
do it on a pretty regular basis to begin with. So,
Right. Okay. Good to know. So the weekend before you did a huge event that most people, plan a whole year in advance. You were doing a 200 plus mile tapering ride.
yeah,
Tell me
yeah,
about your strategy when it comes to training and building up to certain events. I mean, you did just a month ago the Race Across Oregon, 500 plus miles, and a week
yep,
before this event, you did a 200 plus miles. And is that
yeah.
tapering for you?
It isn't. That probably wasn't smart, but it was the only one. It was a race that was actually happening. It was for a charity for a good cause,
Hmm.
and it was only 20 miles from my house. So I
Wow.
almost had to go do it. How do you not do that race?
Right.
Probably wasn't the smartest. I suffered on the big second climb of the HooDoo, probably because of that event, and I pushed that event really hard. Um, I did 240 miles in the 12 hours on the track, and I
Hmm.
finished second. A guy did 12 more miles than me.
Wow.
So I raced pretty hard. I was over, 20 miles an hour on that racetrack.
Hmm.
There's a couple really good climbs on it, but that's not normal. Usually, I don't do a huge event like that. I just kind of do my standard riding, but I
Right.
recover pretty quick. So usually, after a week of easy riding, I'm pretty much recovered from the events that I do.
Hmm. Yeah, that's incredible. For those who don't know, Dave, how old are you?
I'm 52.
Incredible. So usually as you get later in your years, recovery becomes an issue and you need a longer period of time. But it sounds like that's not really the case for you. I mean, racing 240 odd miles and then within a week being able to come out for a 512-mile event, that seems atypical. Tell me about what you do during the week in between in order to recover from a big ride.
Well, it's pretty consistent. Pretty consistent that I ride, like I said, 40 to 70 miles every day.
Hmm.
And so that's pretty consistent. So I don't do really anything different than that. I'm just
Hmm.
very consistent with what I do. I don't necessarily follow a specific taper schedule or anything like that. I just do my standard riding and things like that.
Hmm.
So I don't
So in
necessarily
the
follow a taper protocol or anything.
right. So in the week after you did the 240-mile race, what were you doing each of those days prior? I mean, when did you actually fly out to Utah?
I flew out Friday
Hmm.
um, to Utah early in the morning. So I had Monday through Thursday. I rode. Actually, the Monday after, or I'm sorry, I didn't ride Sunday. That particular race was Saturday night.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
I worked all day in the shop and then went and did the race at 7. Started at 7 p.m., finished at 7 a.m., and then I had to work on Sunday. So I didn't ride Monday. And then
Wow.
I rode Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, my normal 50-mile ride in the morning before work.
Incredible. That is something in itself, Dave.
I
And
think that's why I'm okay at ultra events is I'm just
yeah.
very consistent with riding 40 to 70 miles. I don't necessarily go out and ride huge distances, but I'm very consistent at that, 50,
Hmm.
60-mile mark.
Now, given that you do so much riding, and especially even riding between huge events, within 1 month doing two 500 plus mile races, do you ever take throughout the year any kind of break or rest period, and what does that look like for you?
I don't. It does change though. In the winter, obviously in Wisconsin we have snow and I can't ride outside. So I do ride a little bit on the trainer, so I'm not putting in as much time. last year and specifically, I did way more strength training and lots of yoga. That replaced a lot of my ride time. So my riding kind of tapered down to about an hour to an hour and 25 minutes a day. And then I was doing some yoga and strength training to make up that difference in time. So I just can't ride on a trainer very long, you know, even with all the great new technologies like Swift, I just am not motivated to ride on a trainer.
Yeah, very interesting.
So I tend to ride outside whenever I can. If it's way too cold, like it is a lot of times, then I don't. I've started fat biking a little bit, and that makes it a little better, you know. So you put on your warm clothes and you go out and ride in the snow. But I ride definitely less in the winter.
Yeah, and interesting that you talk about riding on the trainer, because I believe in the HooDoo 500 this year there was an actual virtual option, and there were a number of people that participated, and I believe most of those racers completed the course in about 40 plus hours. So that's a very long time to be on a stationary indoor trainer. Would you ever consider doing something like that, or do you just run away from something like that?
No, well, I have done 24-hour charity rides on trainers, but I just don't like doing it anymore. You know, the most I've done is 12. In recent times, the most I've done is 12 hours. My mind just, I can't do it anymore. Maybe because I have done it. You know, like Hoppo, right? Chris Hopkinson. That guy can sit on a trainer forever. I see his rides, and it's like I just can't do that. And honestly, I don't know if that helps at all. Right? You're just pedaling along. It's not like you're surviving after a while when you're on a trainer that long. So I don't know if it really helps. I honestly found that yoga is probably the best new thing in my life that I love doing, and I miss right now because our yoga studio where I went is closed, and I can't do it on my own. It's not the same thing.
Tell me about what yoga does for you and why it's been working so well.
Multiple things. It certainly has made me stronger. My core strength is better. I'm more flexible, so then I can use all of the muscles that I have. And then the mental part of it, I find myself going into those yoga moments of breathing when I'm on the bike. When it gets hard and I'm suffering, then I just start to breathe and focus on, you know, one thing, and that's moving forward. And so the breathing aspect of yoga has really helped with my riding.
Yeah, that's amazing to learn, because after almost 2 decades of ultra riding, that even at this point you were able to find something else that helped you to optimize your performance. That's an incredible, I think, thing to think about for all of us. No matter how long we've been riding, there's always something more that you can do, or something you can do to tweak your performance. So that's pretty cool. Thanks for sharing that.
No, that's what I've found has been able to keep me going is just to keep working on whatever I can to increase that performance. So
now, where would you put yourself on a scale of 1 to 10 in terms of your fitness right now? 10 being very fit.
I would say I'm an 8 right now.
Interesting. An 8. What would 10 look like? And are you planning to get there for something specific on your roadmap right now?
10 would be a little bit leaner. And that's usually when I'm getting ready for RAM, I feel like I'm at a 10, but I'm not there right now. Just because it's hard to not have events. You know, you have all these events getting canceled. So it's hard to train for things when you don't have events. And, you know, the eating aspect as well. I'm not as focused on nutrition away from riding. You know, I'm not eating as healthy as I could eat, certainly. Now, you know, I love all of the good foods, mostly pizza, but ice cream, you know. So I quit eating ice cream in the winter, and that helps. But just because I'm not riding, you know, when you ride a ton, you can kind of eat whatever you want. Although if you would focus a little more on that nutrition, I think you get stronger and you're better. And so my focus when I'm doing a big event that's really serious that I've got a lot invested in, then I focus on that leading up to it. All aspects, my nutrition and everything. I don't necessarily do that when I'm training.
Interesting. So you did manage to do at least 2 big events within this last month. What else did you have planned for 2020? And were you impacted because of the pandemic and because events were canceled?
Yeah, I was going to do a bunch of gravel racing actually and not do any of the ultra races. So I was going to do I was signed up for the Belgian Waffle Ride, Dirty Kanza, the Mid-South, which happened. I just didn't choose to go. And Rebecca's Private Idaho would be going on right now as we speak. And so I had planned a lot of gravel races. There were a bunch of other smaller ones, 24 Hours of Cummings, which is one in Iowa. So I was going to focus on a lot of gravel racing just because it's so much fun. And because those were all canceled, I basically kind of was like, well, here's a race and it's happening. I'm going to go do this race. So even I started using my coach again. I wasn't using them after my last ram for a while, just because I wasn't training for anything specifically. And I started using him so I could get some focus back into my riding, because I was just randomly riding. So it's helped a lot. And so now, because those races were canceled, I'm doing just more of these endurance races that I know are happening, where you're not in a group of people, and they're not big races, so it's not high volumes of people.
Interesting. So when was your last ram, Dave, and when do you expect your next one to be?
I did 2019, and I DNF'd in that race. I was in second place 2,000 miles into the race, and my shoulder just kind of gave out, and we were on the side of the road, pretty much stopped, and I just kind of said to the crew, I think we're done, and so that's my last ram. I'm thinking of doing it in 2021. I'm pretty focused on the concept of it. It just takes a lot to pull it off and do it. And being a small business owner, it's sometimes challenging to get away and make it happen. So,
yeah. What else do you have on your roadmap going forward? Especially that, some events, they are able to operate in some form or another. Others may stay canceled for some time. Is there anything that you're hoping to do in the next 12 months outside of a potential 2021 ram?
Well, I'm gonna go do Silver State 508 coming up here in 2 weeks.
Oh my goodness!
And then I'm gonna go do the Natchez Trace in October, and then I'm doing a brutally hard gravel race, the Iowa Wind Rock in Iowa, which is about a 380-mile gravel race that I dropped out of the last time I did it, and I'm going to go back and make sure I finish that race. So those are the big races that I'm going to do.
Right. So you're not planning to do the 24-hour world time trials? Is that something that you usually do?
I'm on the waiting list for it right now. I wasn't going to do it because I was doing a bunch of gravel races, so I never signed up, but I did sign up. Now I'm on the waiting list. That race is awesome, and it's interesting because the first year it happened, I was like, the first 3 years I did it, there was like 5 people there, and now it's turned into a most awesome race. When we were doing it, it was like 5 or 6 of us, and Rick and Fred Bothling kept saying, hey, come do this. It's going to grow. It's going to be bigger. And I kept saying it would be cool if there was like a real world championship where all people from all over the world came. And so that's finally happened. And now it's, it's a cool race and it's fun. It's not my specialty just because the terrain and things, it's pretty flat and it's really fast. And I'm marginally fast. I can suffer and things like that, but to go, 24 miles an hour for 24 hours, that's not quite my strong point. I mean, I've always done in the 440 miles, 460, but that's really good, but it's not quite as fast as the guys that are winning.
Right. Yeah, very interesting. Now, kind of getting back to the HooDoo 500 for a moment, I was doing a quick Google search and I learned that HooDoo actually is talking about the tall, thin spires of rock that are common throughout that area. So is this the kind of thing that you're looking at all day as you're riding there?
Part of the time in a few of the areas, yes. That's in the Escalante area where those HooDoos are, and that's why the scenery is so good. A lot of that scenery happens at night. So when you're doing the race at night, you miss a lot of that good stuff. So you miss a lot of that at night. Where if you're doing, like, they had a stage race, so if you're doing the stage race, you get to see all of that awesome scenery. A lot of that best scenery is at night.
Now tell me about your race strategy for something like the HooDoo 500 that you just completed. How are you starting and what's your pace like? Do you think about that ahead of time?
I do. Yep. I always want to start pretty fast and
Mm,
ride pretty hard.
mm,
And so I'm always trying to, um, keep, for me, I don't really watch my watts, my power. I have that capability, but I don't totally watch it. I
mm,
am careful on the climbs as to how far how fast I go. Um, so, but I try to go as fast as I can, honestly, so
mm,
20, 21 miles an hour. I always want to try to stay over 20 as long as I can, try to keep that average. So I watch my average speed
mm,
actually and try to keep it up at a level that's pretty good.
mm. Interesting. How about training and racing with power? Is that something that you do or heart rate?
I train with power all the time.
Mhm,
I don't always race with power.
mm,
And I shouldn't say I don't race with power. I'm careful about how much power I use climbing
mm,
so that I don't go too hard up the climbs. But I don't try to stay at a certain power output when I'm racing. I just try to push the pace, which I know kind of I've got a good feel, but I do watch power on my climbs.
mm.
It's sometimes depressing in a endurance race if you're watching your power because it only goes down over time. It's like,
Right.
oh, I'm pushing hard and I'm only showing 100 watts. What's going
Yeah.
on? So I don't try to watch that too often.
Mm, interesting. Now, in terms of your training, how much of it is structured?
You know what? Now it's all pretty structured, in the standpoint that I get a workout that says I'm supposed to do, you know, 6 efforts at a certain wattage, for a period of time,
Mm,
based on the day, and I generally follow those. In the past I wouldn't follow them as much, but I'll seek out the routes that I'm doing in the morning based on my training to make sure that I can hit those power numbers. That I'm not on a downhill when I need to be on an uphill, or once in a while if I know I need a certain wattage and there's a climb, I'll just do loops on a climb to keep that consistent. So on from a training standpoint, I do use it. I
mm,
find it way easier to use power training on a trainer than outdoors, but I
mm,
do I do it, and I've gotten much better at training with power
mm.
outside as well.
Okay, I'd imagine that would be helping you, especially when it comes to your speed for different events and improving on that front.
Yeah, for sure. That's the goal, is to, build your threshold power up higher so that you can sustain a higher power for a longer effort,
Mhm,
and even in an endurance race, you want to put out the most power you can for the longest time you can. So yeah, that's kind of the goal, is to build speed and power.
mm,
That's always my point. Is sometimes I feel like if I could climb a little better on those long climbs, I would finish a little bit stronger in the overall races. So,
mm,
like Ram, for instance, you're climbing a lot. If I would be able to climb just a little bit better, I think that would help me, and then
mm,
not suffer so much in the heat, because that slows me down for sure.
Interesting. So, is a functional threshold power FTP test something that you do on occasion?
I do. Yep.
Mm.
Yep.
Do you
I
know what
do.
your FTP currently is?
I haven't done one for a little bit. It's the last time we did a test, I was at about 340. So
Wow.
I think that's pretty close to where I'm at right now.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, and that's very high. I'd say that the average rider doesn't have anything close to that.
yeah,
Ultra
that's
rider. Yeah.
pro female racer level. That's what I always say. I'm a
Interesting.
pro. I would be right in the mix in the pro women's field. Although when I do a gravel race, a lot of times, that's funny, is I'm end up a lot of times riding with the first woman in a gravel race. So whoever is the female winner of the race,
Hmm.
I find myself riding with that person quite a bit. So
Wow.
so maybe that is my level. I'm not quite pro male, right?
Yeah. Interesting. So in the course, Dave, you get started very quickly, like you said, and unfortunately this time around, or just around 15 miles, not even very far into the race, you already had a flat tire. Then I'd imagine you were pretty motivated and fresh to be able to push hard to catch the rest of the field. When did this field start spreading out. And give me a sense of who, how many other Voyagers were there that you started with, and then the supported riders, did they start before or after you did?
Okay, so there were five other Voyagers, so not a lot of Voyager racers in the field. We rode the first 7 miles together as kind of neutral, and then I kind of took off and got out on the course and got a flat. They all passed me, and then I ended up passing a few of them. The eventual leader, when I finally caught him, he was actually fixing a flat. So Brooke flatted as well in the race. So it's usually in the Voyager a small field, and then the teams start behind us, or the solo racers started 2 hours behind us. So they started at 7 a.m.
Okay. And then, of course, since you won the overall, I guess you probably never saw any of those solo supported riders?
Correct. Yep. I started seeing the first team came by me after I finished the descent of Boulder Mountain. So that was probably about 300 miles into the race is when the winning team, and I believe they set a record this year. That's when they passed me. I was stopped at a gas station getting some water, and then the other teams passed me. 2 teams passed me on the last climb, or the big climb after Pankwitch. There's a long mountain climb that takes us to the top of Cedar Breaks, and they passed me on that climb. 2 teams that took second and third in the race, they passed me on that. Otherwise, no one else passed me.
And you said that was about 300 miles into the ride?
The first one, was right at just about I'm sorry, it wasn't. It was after Boulder Mountain. So it would have been Bicknell on the course, which is in the top.
I see, right over there.
Right, yep, Bicknell.
So
that's where the
260.
First team passed me there, and then the next 2 people passed me on the climb, basically around Duck Creek Village in the Dixie National Forest after Pankwitch. So right down in there. That's where the next 2 teams passed me.
Yeah, very interesting. Now, in the course overall, I'd imagine you're studying it to some degree beforehand. I mean, you have raced this course before, so you also know it. Tell me about the different sections and just your own preferences, or which ones do you enjoy the most and which ones aren't really your favorite?
So on this particular course, the start is really good, all the way to probably Colorado City. I like that kind of terrain. There's some climbs and some rollers, and then we did go through a new section for me this year called Coralville, and that was a really cool, not busy road at all, because some of the roads get pretty busy on this course. But it was very hard for me to get my rhythm on that section, and that was a new section. It was a really cool area to ride, and it kind of was to my strong point. It was kind of rollers and things, but I just kind of twisted and turned, and I couldn't really get into a good rhythm there in this particular race. Maybe that's what it was. And then to the first gas station, Chevron, is pretty good time that I like. And then there's a stretch to Escalante that I really like. There's a few climbs with some really good downhills, and that's a nice section too. And then Cedar Breaks is going over that climb is just challenging for me. So that's an area I struggle with is that section. And is getting over that Cedar Breaks climb.
Is that the one right here?
Nope, that's the second big climb.
Okay.
Cedar Breaks. So that's at like 400 miles in the event. That's the first, that's Boulder Mountain, the first climb. And that's the second climb.
I see.
So that stretch right there is very challenging, because you kind of have this consistent, steady climbing, and then you've got some downhill, so you get up to about 8,500 feet, and then you have a downhill area, but then you really step up and start climbing seriously. And there are some flats in between there, and it's just hard to get your rhythm and momentum, and then those climbs get pretty steep.
Now, was it in the evening time, or what time of day was it when you were climbing through here?
So I started that climb, and it was in the morning, so like 5 a.m., way at the lower level of the climb, so about 350 miles. So right about there I started, Yeah, right in that area at 5. And so I was in the middle morning sections on that climb, and it just took forever to get up over that climb. It just seemed
Yeah.
like I was climbing way too long. But then you got a huge downhill, which is actually wears you out too. The road is kind of narrow and it was super windy. So that downhill was a little sketchy because you have car traffic and the wind is blowing you around. And then you as you hit that, as you're moving your pointer there's a couple little kickers in there that get you. So so that's where I found, that's, even though it was downhill for a long time, it was a challenging downhill. You're
Right.
definitely getting blown around and lots of traffic behind you, big RVs coming up behind you. So
Oh yeah.
very
Yeah.
close.
Incredible. And so the beginning of this climb, you said about 350 or so. The top there is about 410. So that's a very long time to be climbing overall.
Yes.
You're
Yep.
getting to about 10,000 feet and then you're dropping to about 5,000. So that in itself also is a very long descent there, about 25 miles or so.
It is, yeah, super long. So the good thing is time goes by a little faster, but it was challenging descent because of the winds and the cars and the traffic.
And how about, I'd imagine at that point you're feeling a little sleepy, or did you ever hit any sleepiness through this ride?
Yeah, that's the point where you just do start to lose your energy, is that climb. It just happens to be, 24 plus hours into the race. And so that is one of the more challenging parts of the course for multiple reasons. The climbing, as well as, you're trying to get yourself awake and stay awake. And there's no stops in that section. So it's not like I could hit a gas station and grab a cup of coffee or something to get some caffeine or a Red Bull or whatever, which I do that once in a while. And so there was no spots at all even to stop there.
Wow. And I'd imagine at this point, perhaps there are some parts of you physically hurting or tired, maybe your hands, maybe your neck or your back. Tell me about that.
Yeah. For the most part, my body is pretty good. Even carrying the pack, I'm okay. My feet this race were hurting a lot. So I do have some shoes that are a little newer, and I haven't ridden in them for a long time. So my feet were kind of killing me on that big climb. And I think it was because I was getting a little frustrated, dehydrated, and a few other little things around it that were causing my body some issue. But for the most part, that doesn't always happen. My shoulders will get sore when you're carrying the pack. So when I finished, I had a couple bruises on my shoulders just from carrying the pack. And that's always hard to carry a pack when you're on a long, sustained climb like that.
Yeah, I'd imagine. So overall, in the 510 or 512 miles rather, what was the highest point for you in the race, and maybe a low point?
The highest point was probably pretty early in. Is one of the first big climbs. Is kind of a nice climb, and the sun's rising, and I really enjoyed that climb. So only 30 miles into the race, it was really good. And then I think the lowest point was when you leave Cedar City. I stopped at a gas station, and you leave and you have the heat and a headwind and just a sustained little bit of a rise for like 25 miles as you head out. And it's basically an up for 25 miles, just a slight grade upward. And that's one of the hardest spots. It starts to get really warm. And then once there's a city that you reach and you make a turn, and then you kind of begin your heading back towards St. George to the finish. So that stretch of 25 miles is really hard.
Yeah, very interesting. I'm sure it feels like a lifetime in itself out there doing 512 miles. Now, you do race a lot faster than some of the average riders. So 35 hours, I guess, makes it a bit of a shorter ride for you compared to 40, 50 hours. What is the cutoff time for the Voyager category?
It's 48 hours.
Okay.
And I always think about that too, Justin. When I do a race and it's really hard and I finish in 35 hours, I go and I'm, took a shower and I've eaten, cleaned up, got some sleep, and I'm thinking, wow, there's guys still out on the course at, 46 hours into the event.
Right.
And to me, that's hard, right? So it's sometimes people, give you credit for going really fast, but to me, I got to look at the people that are just out there suffering and surviving to finish the race, and look at it as that's a super challenging thing for them.
Right. And I imagine you think the same thing with the race across America, because what was your fastest completion of that?
8 days and 20 hours.
Wow, incredible. So you're watching some solo racers for 3 or 4 days after that, still out there on the course. And at that point, you've probably recovered somewhat and able to enjoy the rest of the race then.
Yeah, in 2015 when I finished that race, there were a lot of racers I knew that were doing the race, and they were all out there. There was a big battle at about 10 and a half days, and riders, and they suffered through some rain for a long time. And I went to the finish line and watched like 3-4 people that I know that just suffered to get to the finish line. And it was emotionally challenging for me because I knew what they suffered through to get there. And so even though I had been done and cleaned up and rested for a day and a half almost at that point, I was amazed at their tenacity to keep fighting through that rain. And so that's always pretty impressive to me, is when guys are really suffering hard through different conditions that I faced and get to the finish line. So it's fun to see.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool, Dave. Now, you did an excellent job, and big congratulations again. It's incredible that you ride self-supported and are able to compete so well with even the supported racers, even the teams. 35 hours, 43 minutes, that's an incredible time. And it is also a new record for the Voyager overall and for your category. How would you rate your performance on this event, scale 1 to 10, 10 being excellent?
I would say it was a 9, because it was good. I was hoping to do 32 hours and 32 and a half hours. I set the 50 plus record at 35 hours, but I also have the 40 plus record, which is 33 hours and 40 minutes.
Wow.
And so I have that record too. So I wanted to really beat that number. And so although I had a good race, the conditions led me to that, time and things. I was hoping to go a little faster. So that's why, although it was a good race and I was very happy with it, I didn't reach my goal. So, that was, but it was, my goal was to beat my younger record of the 40, when I was in the 40s.
Jeez, must be something else to be competing with yourself.
Yeah, right. That was what I was trying to do, right, is beat my previous record. So, I guess that doesn't happen all the time,
Yeah, I guess in your Garmin, you could even upload your previous 40 plus record there and be competing, right? And you can get all kinds of...
I could have. Maybe that's what I should have done. It was a different course. So I was joking with them when they said, you got a record on a different course. And I said, well, you can't give everyone records just because the course is a little different all the time. And she's like, well, you get the record for this course. So it's good.
Yeah. Well, terrific job there, Dave. Big congratulations, both on the HooDoo 500 victory, but also on the race across Oregon. And we'll definitely be following your journey through the rest of this year. I know you have a few other events, and we really hope that in 2021 we can see you out there on the roads of RAM again, because you really do put on quite the performance. And I must say, as an American myself, it's very exciting to watch a fellow American competing on the global stage and doing so well to represent our country. And so tell me about that for you. I mean, just being an American, and in an event like RAM, there are other Americans, but more and more so over the years, a lot of global riders from Europe and other countries as well.
Yeah, I take pride in the fact that I'm maybe carrying the flag when I go to that race for us. And I know people are watching and cheering for me because they want to see an American win a race that happens in America, and that's hasn't happened since Alan Larson did it in 2003. So it's been a long time, that's 18 years it'll be. So, when I look at it and I enter a race, I always say, well, I'm the chance to win. There might be other U.S. racers who are faster. In fact, I know there are sometimes, but I also know what RAM is, and they're not, I don't think they're as fast in RAM as I have a really good team when I've done the race. So I take pride in the fact that I'm trying to win for myself and for the U.S. So that there is something that to be said for that.
Most definitely. And so we will be cheering you on and hope to see you out there. Hope everything works out and the Race Across America 2021 edition can still be on. So we're all keeping our fingers crossed for that. But Dave, pleasure speaking with you. A couple short questions, sprint round to the finish line, just to end on a fun note. First question I have for you: you ride a lot, but when is your next? What would you consider your next long training ride?
Tomorrow, I'm going out to do at least 100 miles on gravel tomorrow. So I'm going to go out and there's a gravel race that was canceled. I'm going to go ride that course tomorrow. I'm hoping to do a little more than the 100 miles, but I think it'll probably end up being 100 miles tomorrow.
Cool. Yeah, sounds like fun and some of your favorite riding.
Yeah.
How would you rate yourself, I'd imagine, on the high end in terms of bicycle maintenance, 1 to 10, 10 being great?
I'm pretty good, although I don't work on my own bike a lot. I usually have the guys in the shop do it. I'm busy helping someone, and I always look at it as a way to see the quality of work that our guys do. So like I just went to a new tubeless setup on my bike and had one of the younger kids do it and rode it today, and it held up. So I'm giving them an extra bonus. I'll buy them lunch tomorrow because they survived a day of riding. But I'm okay. Some of the technology on the newer bikes, I can certainly do all my own maintenance, but I tend not to. I tend to let the guys in the shop take care of that.
Yeah. And since you ride so much and especially doing very long races, 500 plus miles RAM, I mean, what does maintenance look like for you? I mean, how often are you having to do certain things on your bike?
Oh, well, all the time, So a lot of times I'll finish a ride and come right to work and hang my bike up, and one of the guys will grab my bike because they know, it has the chain probably hasn't been lubed, in a couple hundred miles. So I replace my chain generally every 2,000 miles because that really affects the shifting of the bike. And so that happens sometimes, if I'm doing a couple long races in, a 2-month period, I'm probably putting new tires on my bike every 2 months for sure. And when you have multiple bikes, that happens because I like to ride all of my bikes. I take pride in a week if I can ride all the bikes I have on some certain kind of terrain that they are suitable for. That's a cool thing.
Yeah, awesome. Now, you've owned a number of bicycles through the year. You have a number right now, but is there still a dream bicycle that you would like to have one day?
Well, when I did 2019 Ram, I had the Peter Sagan Roubaix, and it was cool. I love the gold color of the bike. I'm kind of into those bikes. And when I got it built up, a customer came in and said, "I'll buy that bike when you're done with it after Ram." And so I said, "Yeah, sure." And then I rode it and I really liked it, and I sold it to him. And so now I have a Tarmac in the same color, the Peter Sagan gold color. And the same customer came in and he wants to buy that bike. So,
cool.
I don't, this was our 25th year of being in business, and I was going to do a custom colored bike, and I just never got to doing it. So, so I like gold and black colors of like the Sagan bikes from maybe 2 or 3 years ago. So now all of the bikes are really cool. So I used to really be fired up about those. And now I just look at it. It's a tool that lets me go ride. So it's, it's just a bike. It's a really nice bike. It's not like I have a junky bike. So they're all really nice. So I'm lucky enough on that standpoint that I just use it as a tool, and it's, when I see a cool bike, I certainly like it and admire it, but I look at it personally that they're just let me go do what I love to do.
Yeah, very cool, Dave. Final question. Who would you like to nominate for an episode on the show? A story that has touched you, inspired you, someone that you'd love to learn more about?
Oh, who? Geez. I've ridden with Marco for so long from Slovenia, Marco Balo, and we have a unique track record along the way that I look to him right now as someone that is still fighting out there and doing amazing things on a bike, even as he turns 50. So I always look at it that way, that, he's amazing. Of course, Peter Sagan is, for people nowadays, that's the coolest cyclist to watch, right? He's the most fun, the most spirited, the most unique. And I have to admit, even though there was some cheating there, Lance Armstrong is always good to me, because he trained harder than anyone. He was smarter than anyone. He even cheated better than everyone, but everything he did was calculated. His personality style was a little off, but he was pushing the limits of the sport in his day. So, for better or worse, I like Lance Armstrong too. But more to me is probably Marco Ballo, for sure, because he's a strong rider, a good friend, a really good person. And he has helped now a lot of people. That's become his business, is to help other riders succeed doing the things he likes to do and I like to do. So
yeah,
I think Marco, for sure.
And we did, for those who don't know, recently have an interview with Marco covering his recent world records that he said it actually turned out to be 12, but he was going for 2 specific ones, including the fastest time to do 1,000 kilometers. And on that note, I do have actually one more question. Because of the pandemic, and there's been a lot of virtual riding, a lot of rides canceled, a lot of people have been flocking to set a world record. Is that on your radar?
It isn't. There is one ride I want to do and get an FKT on. It's a mountain bike ride, which also makes it really hard for me because I'm not that skilled. But I want to do Fruta to it's the Cocopelli Trail, and I want to do it out and back. There are known times one way, but there's not a known time there and back, which would be a 280-mile mountain bike ride on some pretty hard terrain. So I have that on my radar to do, but I just haven't. I went out and rode part of the course this year to do it, and I suffered and crashed a few times, and so it's just not my skill level. But that's something I do want to attempt to do.
All right, cool. Well, we'll be watching, Dave. So big congratulations again on your HooDoo 500 victory and everything else that you've been up to. Can't wait to see what else you get to do in the next 12 months, and we'll be following your journey and cheering you on. So thanks for taking the time to share all of your experiences with the HooDoo 500. Look forward to having you back on the show again soon.
Great. Thanks, Justin. Appreciate it.
All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed that. Hope you got some inspiration. Go out there, race Dave, even if you're supported. Give him a run for his money and give him some motivation, especially on RAM, so that way he can bring the American flag to the finish line in first place. Until then, everyone, keep spinning ultra.